Welcome to the Salty Life Podcast.
We are your hosts, Paul and Sav, entrepreneurs, parents, business owners, and yes, Christians.
Getting salty has a few different meanings in our culture, some good and some not so good.
We are here to help you add some of that good saltiness to your life by giving advice based off of our own experiences
and mistakes,
and providing you with some practical solutions to navigating this crazy world.
Let's get salty.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Salty Life Podcast with Paul and Savannah.
Hi.
So here we are. We're at the end of the year. We're going to have a special end of the year episode for you today. And do you want to kind of break down what we're going to be talking about today, Savannah?
Sure. Okay, so if you've been following us for any amount of time, you know that we do a annual, I guess annual and yearly means the same thing, but we do an annual planning session, which we are just now finishing up. We go over our goals, our plans, our financial goals, our budget. We go over everything that we're going to do for the following year. And we started doing this, I think it's been annual for about 10 years now. Would you say that's about right, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while. And I think it's something that we all know that we should probably do. I think we avoided it for a long time. And we were talking to a group of friends a few nights ago, and it turned out that it was not very popular among the guys to do something like this. So we do think it's important.
So it kind of got started initially. In my early 20s, starting my career, I went to a couple of conferences where they talked about writing your goals for your business. But as a hairstylist, I started doing that. I love numbers. I liked looking at the numbers and trying to figure out how I could beat my numbers. So that kind of spurred my interest into personal development and goal planning. I really got into dream boards, which was not Paul's thing. And most guys are not into doing a dream board. And so I started doing kind of my own little planning session every year for my own personal income goals and business goals. And then as Paul saw me do that, he didn't understand why I didn't want to look at a budget and do goals as far as our life together. So do you want to kind of talk about how that kind of inspired you to do goals with me?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of things in our marriage, we just didn't agree for a long time. And so, you know, you were doing the year-end goal planning. All I saw was you making these huge dream boards and cutting pictures out of magazines. And you're like, why won't you do this with me? And I'm like, why would I do that with you? That's not something that a guy would do. And so I think we both wanted to do the goal planning. We just had very, very different ideas about what that looked like. So that was probably the biggest hindrance getting going in the very, very beginning.
So over time, with me doing the goal planning and the dream boards, and you can also call them vision boards, he wanted to do the budget. And, you know, I was in charge of the finances at the salon with my business, but he was in charge of the finances with everything else personal. All of our personal stuff he did. So I didn't even look at it. And we have another episode that goes over kind of like finances and how we've evolved into doing things together. I think it's also important to mention, from the moment that we got married, all of our finances have always been together. Our name, both of our names are on everything except for the things that I refused to go sign for because I just didn't want to go.
But we're married, so in Texas, if it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like my truck and stuff.
Yeah.
And your car, your name's not even on your car.
Because I didn't want to go to the dealership and sign for it because I just didn't feel like it that day.
But the bigger point you're trying to make is that everything is being combined.
Yes.
And if you talk to any financial guru, if you're going to have a successful marriage, as unpopular as this might be, is you really do have to combine everything, because the only way you're ever going to, I guess, come to any kind of an agreement on money is to go ahead and have those, let's call them disagreements on where the money's going to be spent, and make sure that you guys are on the same page, which kind of ties back into this whole goal planning thing that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very clear, like marriage is supposed to make, the Bible says that two become one. You're supposed to become like one flesh. And it's really hard to grow together if your finances aren't together.
Would you say it's pretty hard to trust each other too if you don't know
absolutely
where all the money's going in their separate accounts. And
absolutely. And let us also mention too that before we get off of the bank account thing or whatever, we have tried all different things. We've tried to have separate spending accounts. We've tried to do all the things that lots of people do and that are popular. We are the most successful when everything is together. Do you agree with that?
yeah, when everything is together and then we actually sit down and look at it, not every single day, but we usually try to do it once a month just to look at everything.
Paul sends me a financial statement at the end of every month to make sure that I know what's going on, because since I'm not in control of it, I don't like to look at it. I've always had the mentality of I just want my card to work when I go to use it, which I know is frustrating for him.
Because if I didn't send you a financial statement at the end of every month, you literally would not look at anything ever.
That's actually not true anymore.
And keep swiping that card.
This year I've been keeping looking at the bank accounts. Occasionally I'll open the app and go in and just see, okay, that's where we're at. So anyways. Okay.
So, but we've been married for 15 years and this is the first year that you finally started to look at the bank account on your own, like once or twice a month.
I always looked at my business accounts.
Okay.
Anyways, that shows you how much I trust my husband. So moving forward, I agreed if he would do the dream board type planning and write his goals down and all of that with me, that I would also look at the budget, budget is kind of like a curse word in our house for me. I don't like to hear the word. I don't like to talk about budgets.
I think it's a curse word just in general.
For
most people
that way. I will also say too, talking to a lot of people, we've realized that in most of the people that we know, the woman does the finances. So we understand that we're backwards in most cases, which I was surprised by that. I guess I always just thought the man should do the finances. And when he wanted to do it, I was like, cool, I don't have to worry about it. That's awesome. I won't deal with it. You deal with it. I can just spend what I want to spend. So I wish y'all could see Paul's face right now as I'm talking. Anyways, so do you want to talk about kind of how we got started with our planning session?
I'm trying to remember, but I think again, after several heated discussions and whatnot, we finally agreed to do, kind of a joint meeting. Of course, I have never done a dream board / vision board, and I never will. So there was none of that. And, so we had to make a compromise, right? I was going to write down the bigger goals and we could talk about the bigger goals together to make sure we're kind of on the same page about where we're going. And then you agreed that you would actually try to somewhat make a budget and, at least have an idea of what our monthly expenses should be within reason. And that was a big stressor for me for many years. So we kind of came to that compromise.
And let me add, for us, because we've been self-employed for so long, and even when he had his, when he was a high school teacher and had that set income, I was still self-employed. So it's really hard. We've had to really figure out a way to make a budget with fluctuating incomes. So if you have set incomes, a set amount of money coming in, it's much easier to sit down and say, this is what we have. Where is it going to go? Whereas there were months where I had income and there were months that I didn't have income. And now with him being a real estate broker and me still being self-employed behind the chair, there are months where he doesn't have an income and then there's months where he has a big income. So we've found a new way over the past few years to budget based on that, which is, I'd say it's unconventional, but it works for us. So we're going to share that too.
Do you want me to share it right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, when I talk to the boys about it, I call it the secret of life, kind of joking around, but it's something that I did not come up with on my own. Okay, I borrowed it from Jim Rohn, who was a motivational speaker back in the 80s. But and this came about, I would say too, because all the budgeting apps and the budgeting gurus like Dave Ramsey and things like that. Yeah, if you have a set income, it's pretty easy, right? You can set up your app and, all right, I have $75 left over at the end of the month. I'm going to make sure I put that in my car budget for next year for when I have to replace my car or my tires or whatever, right? But like Savannah's saying, with all the fluctuating income, what we ended up doing, what's worked really, really well for us, is that every single dollar that comes in, whenever it comes in, it gets divided and it has a place that it has to go. Right. So we have to pay our own taxes every quarter. because nothing comes out of our paycheck because we're self-employed. That's a whole nother topic. If most people had to do that, our government and our taxation system would probably look very, very differently. But when the money comes in, we have to set aside, 25 to 30% of our income into a separate savings account so we can make sure that we pay whatever's due every quarter. And then the next 10% after that, we tithe. So we give that to church or charity. And then the next 10% after that, we put in our personal savings account. And then everything after that just goes in the general fund, I guess you would call it.
And let me also add, in our general fund, that's where we also do our retirement, and all that stuff comes out of that general fund. So
yes, so everything comes out of the general fund: mortgage payment, credit card payment.
But the three things that come out before we have general funds to pay our mortgage, buy groceries, go to dinner, go on vacation, are the tax, tithing, and savings. We do that no matter what.
Yeah. And so if you do the math, what we try to do is try to live off of about, well, I say we try to, because 25 to 30% is going straight to the government. So we don't really have a choice, but we're basically living off of about 60% of our income. And that's another, if you guys are familiar with Shaquille O'Neal, I heard him talking about wealth, and he said someone told him when he signed his first big basketball contract that rich people learn to live off 50% of their income, but wealthy people live off of 25% of their income because they're investing the rest.
That's a new goal then, right?
Yeah. So we're not quite at 50%, but yeah, at some point, if we could live off 25% of our income and invest the rest, that's how you get wealthy. So, yeah.
So that's something that's helped us. And then doing the planning session, initially we just sat down at home. I mean, for the first 4 or 5 years that we did it together, we sat down at home, and it was mostly based on budget and money. And then okay, well, once we pay out, and a lot of it when we first started, we had a lot of debt. Mm-hmm. And so it was okay, we need to pay this off because we're paying all this interest. How can we do this? And when Paul really when I finally agreed to sit down and look at it and realized how much I was paying interest on credit card debt and loans for my business and different things, I was so mad and frustrated and pissed off at the world.
Did you feel like you've been lied to?
I didn't just feel like I've been lied to. I felt like I was being really stupid, and I'm not a stupid person. So by not paying attention to those things, I was kind of living in denial. And so I want to encourage people, when you sit down to do this, it's not going to be fun at first. It's going to hurt, okay? Especially if you've been living your life with credit cards and in a lot of debt and living not living within your means. It's going to be rough. Would you agree with that?
No, for sure. I mean, like I said, this was not fun. The first several years of our marriage were painful in lots of ways, but especially financially. Yeah.
And I mean, in our 20s, I mean, there were a couple of weddings that we went to that were, really expensive because they were out of state or out of the country. And we, we charged that stuff on credit cards, and we'll just pay for it later. Things will be fine. And things were fine, and we did pay for it later, but we ended up paying a lot more because instead of just saying, yeah, we can't do it right now, we just did it. So we learned a lot with debt, and we live very differently these days. But just keep in mind, there are things like that it's gonna be rough when you first start doing it. So just know it gets better, and it's become this thing that Paul and I get so excited about. Every year. We're excited. Whenever it's time for us to get ready for planning session, the month leading up to it, we're both looking at stuff, we're pulling things, we're talking about the future, we're talking about what we want in the future. And then we sit down and we have this, it's about 8 hours, right?
Yeah. But I would say, just continuing on. Yeah. In the beginning, it's it's not fun, right? And dealing with your budget and your finances, especially if you're not a good spot, it's not fun. But I think it's very important to have the flip side of that in the same conversation is okay, now where do we want to go? And that's where you can dream big and get excited. So you've got to have a reality check.
Yeah.
Which is sobering. And then you also have to have the positivity and where do I want to go that gets you excited. And so you end the planning session on the up note of where are we trying to go this year, excited, determined, ready to go.
Yeah. And like I said, that's how we got out of debt. Was sitting down and looking at it and saying, okay, And we also gave ourselves little rewards like, okay, well, when we pay this off, we're going to do this. And when we pay this off, when we get out from underneath this debt, we're going to do this. And so I was the one, I need like something dangling in my face. Like I want to go on a trip, or I want to do like a weekend away, or I want to go buy something. So Paul was good at like, okay, you want that, let's do this. And once this happens, we'll do that reward, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything big because once again, we were trying to get out of debt, but those things mattered to me, and we compromised a lot. The planning session is a lot about compromise because you both have to come to an agreement and give and take a little bit in different areas, right?
Yeah. So I don't know where I came up with this, but I was talking to one of my friends and we were talking about this, and, they didn't really want to do a planning weekend, but I said, it just came to my mind, like, common, or if you have separate goals, it pulls you apart. If you have common goals, it pulls you together. So you have to decide, we do have our own personal goals. Like I have some personal health goals, and like I have a goal for golf next year and stuff like that. But, and that's good to have your own personal goals. But if you don't have common goals as a couple, then, because I think in the beginning we did have our separate goals and our separate plans for our marriage and which direction we were going to go, and they did not agree. And so we were basically just pulling each other apart and not going forward. We were pulling each other sideways and didn't go anywhere until we could agree on what direction do we actually want to go as a couple.
Yeah. And so now we're going to kind of talk about how we do our planning session and what that looks like. I will also add, in the beginning, we just did it at home, and we didn't have the money in the beginning to go away for the weekend or do anything like that. Over the past 5 years, we've made it a tradition to get away. And even if we can only get away for one night, that's what we do. This year, we actually got 3 nights, which has been awesome because it also gives us more time to reconnect and just kind of recharge. But many years we only get one night away. And some years it was just in a hotel that was local, and we just went to dinner and then we stayed up late, did our planning session, and we got up and went home in the morning. It really just depends on childcare for us and how long we can have someone watch. And we're so grateful for my mom for watching The Voice this weekend for us. Side note on that. But we get away and we focus on each other. We turn our phones off. We have that time to really hash some things out if we need to, if we're in disagreement with where money is going to be spent or where our time is going to be spent or things like that. And then we first do our personal goals. Like we start with our personal goals. And Paul, I think it would be important for you to talk about how you do your personal goals, and then I'll kind of talk about how I do mine, because they're very different.
Okay. So when I do my personal goals, I have, I basically divide it in half, but I have personal goals and then business goals. So like my personal business, I usually come up with a dollar amount that I want to earn every year. And then that in the beginning, that's all it really was. It was how much money do I want to make this year and how am I going to do it? It's evolved over time. So like now I have health goals. I have spiritual goals. I added a golf goal this year because apparently I need a hobby, and I'm happier when I have a hobby, and I tend to work too much. So I'm going to make sure I do that as well too. But like I typically have like a weight loss goal, but this year I'm not going to have a weight loss goal.
Well, you don't need to lose any more weight.
So, yeah, but I'm going to, I'm working on I have a couple goals for how I want to look, I guess, not so much weight related, but, and it just, yeah, so I end up with several goals. And then, what I started doing this last year, which has helped me a lot, was, 90% of what we do in our day-to-day life is habits. And so I started, trying to take on a new habit every single month. And so I'm trying to create habits that are going to support the goals that I have and try to just make it all habitual. So I don't do it automatically. I don't have to think about it.
Do you want to talk about your saying for the year? Because you have a motto this year.
Yeah. Well, and there's something else that we differ on. So Savannah always has a word for the year, and she's always pressuring me to have a word for the year, but that's just not the way my brain functions. And so again, there's a million different ways to do this successfully. I think it's just, you got to figure out what works for you. So I have a phrase, and my phrase for this year is no days off.
And I want you to elaborate, because when he told me this, I felt super, super loved and super proud.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. I'm not sure if I can recreate why I made you feel that way, but so no days off to me is I'm trying to remember exactly,
Do you
but
want me to tell you the part that made me like,
sure.
oh,
Why don't we start with that?
I was like, well, what does that mean to you? Because I'm sitting here and going, no, you need a day off from work. Like, because he works 24/7. And he's like, well, no days off from being a good husband or a good dad or a good provider or from reading my Bible and having time with God. And it just made me feel all like warm and fuzzy and good inside. So I was really happy about that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my
Remember
thinking,
that, right?
I do remember that. Yeah. But no, so my thinking is that like sometimes, you get frustrated with work or frustrated with life and you're just like, you know what? I just need a day off. I'm just going to eat junk today. I'm just going to, go in my office and scroll on my phone for a few hours and avoid my wife and kids. And, none of those things are productive. So the no days off thing, it's not necessarily not taking a day off from work, but it's like life's short. So I don't want to waste any more time. That's where we're going.
I love that.
Okay.
Do you want me to talk about how I kind of do mine now?
Sure.
Are you done or no?
Yeah, that was basically it. Well, do you want to start? You want to tell us what your word for the year is and explain what that means?
Okay, so I've been doing a word of a year probably about 10 years. Maybe longer. I don't remember. I could go back and tell you some of the words, but and the thing is, sometimes I'm really good at me. It's like my intent. If you've ever seen those my intent bracelets, that's what inspired me to do this. I have a bracelet some years and some years I don't. But my word for this past year was whole. And I tend to hyper focus on one area of my life. And I wanted to spend the year more balanced, not so focused on health, not so focused on work or anything like that. And I feel like I've kind of achieved that. This kind of a year of a little bit of rest and not being too focused on any area. But I'm kind of done with that now. I realize like I don't thrive trying to have more like peace, I guess, or more balance. I kind of thrive with projects. And so my word for the new year is gumption. And if you don't know what gumption means, I'm going to tell you because I just love the definition that I found. Shrewd or spirited initiative or resourcefulness, the ability to decide what is the best thing to do and do it with energy and determination. So my word is kind of like my intent for all areas of my life in the new year. And I'm really excited about this word. And I think I wasn't super excited about my word last year. And I looked back. We always look back at our goals from the year before and see how we did. And I think last year at our planning session, I was just kind of like, I was looking at the state of the world and inflation and all the things. And I just wasn't feeling very inspired or excited. And so this year I said, you know what? Screw the world. I'm going to focus on God and faithfulness and know that He has a great plan for us and He has big things for us. And I'm just going to go along like none of the problems of the world exist and see where that takes us. And so my goals this year are really, really big, and I plan on achieving them regardless of what happens in the world. And I would say having that perspective has taken like a huge weight off my shoulders. So I'm feeling really energized after our weekend. Anyways, so I do my goals. I have a few different sections that I go over. What? You look like you're going to ask me a question.
No, you're doing great. Keep rolling.
Oh, okay. So I go over my financial goals, my physical goals, my spiritual goals, personal development, which is like more like things I want to learn to do or books I want to read. I have a fun section because I have to have fun to be inspired to do things. Like I have to have like carrots. So we also usually go over trips that we want to go on, how much time we want to spend at the lake, things like that. Relationships is a big section that I spend a lot of time on. So if you look at where I wrote all my goals, the relationship section is twice as big as all of the other sections. And it's because, I have things that I want to do. I might want to mend relationships with people. I might want to spend more time in certain areas with certain people. I want to go on trips and see different people. Or, like this year I have a goal to call certain people at least once a week so I can make sure I check in on them and maintain those relationships. So your goals aren't all financial and they're not all physical and they're not all spiritual, but you want to look at your life as a whole and find all different goals that you can get excited about. And something that Paul and I have both done, and I think we've talked about this many, many times, but years ago, there's like a podcast or like a video clip of Matthew McConaughey, and I saw it years ago, and he's talking about who he wants to be, like who he's always chasing, and he's always chasing the person he's going to be in 10 years. And he's looking back and saying like, did I become who I was chasing? So like, instead of like looking at your people around you and competing with other people, it's like, are you competing with who you're going to be tomorrow? And so I always kind of look at like, who do I want to be at 50? What do I want to look like? What do I want my life to look like? And then I chase after that. And I kind of I bioengineer it backwards. So like, okay, what does it look like to be that person? What are their habits? What are the things that they do every day? What are the things that inspires them? What are the things that are important to them? Who are their friends? What does their group of like sphere of influence look like? And then try to become that person. I say, since I started doing that, who I am has changed so much. And I mean, I feel like I've changed for the better. I'm constantly looking back at who I was 10 or 15 years ago and going, oh my gosh, she was horrible. And so I hope that 10 years from now, I look back at who I am now and I'm like, ugh, she was horrible too, because that means that I've grown, you know?
Mm-hmm. I have a more simple way to summarize that.
Okay, go.
So the way I think of it is, would 50-year-old Paul want to kick 40-year-old Paul's butt for being a loser?
That's a great way to look at it.
That's my perspective. Yeah.
But you're kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah. Like would 50-year-old, what would 50-year-old Paul say to me right now? He's like, what the heck are you doing? Like, get off the couch. You know, you don't have that much time left. Do something. Like, why are you wasting this time? You don't have a right to sit there and just zone out and, you know, scroll on your phone and, you know what I mean? Like, Get off your butt, get going. Where do you want to be?
Well, and we even kind of work backwards on like what our financial goals are and stuff like that, because it's like, okay, when our kids are grown and we're retired, what do we want that to look like? Mm-hmm. What do we want to be able to take our grandkids to like Europe for the summer? Like, what does that look like? And then work backwards. Like, okay, I want to have the freedom to just get up and go if I want to. I want to have the freedom to volunteer and spend time. And, you know, it's funny when it comes to retirement, because for years our goal was financially, like time freedom. Like we wanted to get to a place where we could just not work. And that has changed so much. Do you want to talk about that, Paul?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the thing about this goal planning thing is like a lot of times, and you listen to, you know, any personal development guru or whatever, but your plans change and your goals change, and that's okay. You know, because like, yeah, for the longest time I mean, honestly, in my mind, I thought retirement was sitting on a beach and or playing golf every day. And, you know, that was the goal, right? That's why I get up in the morning. And now, no offense to anyone, but I think if I was just playing golf every single day until I died because I was financially free, that would be a huge waste of life, you know? So those plans are evolving and changing very, very much, you know? So now
don't you think that that's changed though, because you've matured and now it's like you want purpose and you want to leave a legacy and you want to make an impact, because otherwise what's the point in being here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, you know, for a lot of years, my goals, you know, including what retirement looked like, was very, very selfish, you know, and you have kids and a family, and all of a sudden, you know, it's what you want isn't that important, you know? And so we're talking about now we want to have time. We want to be able to spend time with our kids. We want to be able to spend time with our grandkids. We want to be physically able to do things with our grandkids. And so we're trying to get in shape now before we, you know, get to the back nine. I was watching a reel the other day, and the guy was talking about how he made all these life changes at like 45. He's like, I was getting ready for the back nine, you know? It's like, I want to have quality of life. I have a really, really good friend who's, you know, he's like 56 or something like that. And he's in the absolute best shape of his life. But he's like, because he doesn't need to work anymore. But it's like, what's the point of having money if I'm, you know, bedbound and sick? So yeah, those perspectives it just changes, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of you. And I will also say, like, I feel like our shift on like our long-term goals, like, cause I keep a record of all of our goals from the years before. And I love to pull them out and be like, look, this is what we said in 2019. And this is what we said in 2021. And, you know, 2020 was it was a doozy, cause we had so many goals. And then 2020 happened, and it was like after the first quarter, we were both looking at each other going, okay, so I guess we're not doing this year, and I guess we're not doing this. And then at the end of the year, we exceeded all of our goals. So I think it's important to also know, like, things can shift and things can change and you might need to pivot, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because it is kind of like an annual thing that the first quarter of the year just kicks us in the teeth.
Well, I was going to say, do you want to talk? It's not so much the first quarter necessarily, but it's always, it's typically January for whatever reason. And
well, I think there's a couple of reasons. So being self-employed, yes, we pay our taxes all year and we keep a certain amount back, but it doesn't matter because we do our taxes early. We always do our taxes in January. And some years we've ended up owing a lot more than we were estimated. And so that's something that can like really be hard in January whenever they're like, hey, you owe another 20 grand or whatever. And I'm just pulling that number out of my butt. Like, I'm just as an example, but that can be really hard. So things like that, sicknesses, I struggle with pneumonia here and there. And so like even last year, the first 2 months of the year, I was sick and it was hard.
But I was going to say, though, I just think it's anytime you're going to do something and you're like, you know what, I'm actually going to make a change this year. I'm actually going to do this, whether it's lose weight or get in shape or save money or pay off debt, something, you know, you call it Satan, what do you want to call it? Something is going to attack you and things aren't going to go well at first. And it's kind of like a test, you know, can I actually make it through this? And, you know, I think when we were younger, particularly, we would get really down and discouraged. And I'm not saying it's not discouraging now, but at the end of the day, it just really comes down to like now we just expect something bad to happen. You know, we're not waiting for it, but it's like we made all these plans, right? And then something is going to happen. A car is going to break down, something like that is. So my advice to you would just be like, just expect it. Know that it's part of life. And maybe it's a, you know, life's test to see if you're really serious about doing what you said you were going to do. But just, it's like the old adage is just, you know, you just don't quit. If you don't quit, you'll get there, right? So power through, don't quit, keep moving forward no matter what. And then you look back, you know, in 6-8 months and you're more right. You're usually right on track where you wanted to be anyway, as long as you just don't quit.
Yeah. So just keep swimming.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, do you want to move on to, so we do our personal goals and we're separate at that time. Like he goes off and does his, I go off and do mine. And that usually takes a few hours or a couple hours. And, you know, I'll also add, I start my goals with like, I write down everything I'm grateful for. I write down what inspires me. I write down, you know, things that I'd like to achieve in the future, who I'd like to be. And then I sit down and start working on my goals. And then I break my goals down into action steps. And a lot of times the action steps don't happen until we come together. So once we get together and start talking about like, he'll tell me like, hey, these are the things that I want to do. These are my goals. And I tell him mine. And then we kind of come together. So in that, do you care if I share one of your goals that's also one of mine this year?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so when we came together this year and he was talking about his health goals, and it was kind of funny because his health goals kind of go along with my relationship goals, which is kind of funny. So he's talking about he wants to do weights at least 3 days a week. And I was like, well, I had weights on my list for physical, so I want to do weights with you. We'll do it together because we've been working out together. And then he's like, yeah, and I'm going to do my cold plunge 3 days a week. And I was like, cool. I wanted to start cold plunging. Don't hold me to this, people, but I'm going to do it. So I'll start cold plunging with you because it makes sense because he gets the tank ready or whatever. And then he said, well, I also want to do a 96-hour water fast. And I was like, ooh, okay, well, you know what? I'll do the water fast with you because I've been wanting to do a water fast. So
can I interject and say why we're doing the 96-hour water fast?
Yes. And then I'll go back to how the physical ones relate to my relationship ones. Go ahead.
Okay. So I've been doing a lot of research on fasting and I've been doing some form of intermittent fasting for a couple of years now. So obviously it's great for weight loss just through calorie reduction, but there's been a lot of studies now and I can't quote the studies, but just Google it and look it up. But if you go on a long water fast and, you know, you can have like, so I have bulletproof coffee in the morning where I have some cream and MCT oil in it. But you're not eating any food and you're definitely not eating any sugar, right? You can have some supplements or vitamins or things like that. But if you go 4 or 5 or 6 days with only drinking water, then your chance of getting cancer goes down by 70%.
And that's for your whole life.
For your whole life, doing it one time. And so a lot of people are doing it, like they're doing a 4 or 5 or 6 day water fast once a year.
Didn't Jim Rohn do that once a year or twice a year or something?
I don't know. He's done some things. I know he's done fasting as well too. He's doing the cold plunging, but yeah. I don't really want to get cancer. And, it turns out eating.
You've already had it, so.
Well, it's skin cancer, but minor. But it turns out that eating sugar and eating all the time is one of the best ways to make sure that you do get cancer. So trying to do the opposite of that.
Yeah. So I agreed to do that with him. And so one of my relationship goals was to do more things together with Paul and not have it have to be like a special night out or something. Like just do more boring things as a family and together. And so that's one of my relationship goals. So whenever I'm like, okay, well, I want to do the physical things too, we can just do those together because we've kind of already started doing those things together. And it's been really cool to watch the boys, like, they have their own little weights and they want to work out with us. And I credit Paul for that 1,000% because having little boys, they just want to be like their daddies. And I love that they're getting so excited about health and fitness, and Brooks has learned to read the back of a package. And it was really funny when he got Halloween candy. He's like, where's all this stuff on the package? I'm like, we got to Google it. And he's like, they're trying to kill me, Mom. I'm like, I know, it's poison. So it's been really fun to watch that. And I want that to continue. So we come together, we talk about all the things. Then we go over our financial goals too. And that's where we come together once we have each other's financial goals and we kind of break it down to each other with our careers and stuff. Then we put that total income and total goal together. We figure out, and this is something that we shifted a few years ago. We always looked at like, okay, how much money do we want to make for us, right? And what do we want to do with it? And we've been tithing for what, like 10 years now, would you say?
I think probably close to it, yeah.
Yeah. And that was a whole thing, but we've gone over that before. And we shifted a few years ago to like, instead of like, how much do we want to make? It was how much do we want to be able to tithe? And that has really shifted. I feel like it shifted everything. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah. I mean, so I have an income tracker that I really just do it with pen and paper, but I track every single dollar that comes in. Cause we have our goal that we want to make each year. Right. But the way we flipped it is we came up with a goal that we wanted to tithe. So again, after we take 25 to 30% and put in that tax savings account, the next 10% we tithe. And so if you just do the math and work it backwards, like if I want to tithe, let's just say $10,000 or $20,000, then I have to do the math backwards and see what is that 10% of, and then, well, there you go. There's my income goal for the year.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, and I want to say too, I think we've talked about this before, but I was very, very resistant and hesitant to tithing. And then I feel like once we started tithing and did it consistently, and then kind of put this whole thing on automatic, when money comes in, it all goes a certain place. That's when our income actually kind of took off, So I feel like we've been blessed by doing this, but I guess you're trying to put God first in your finances, right? That's what we're supposed to do.
Right. And I think that in having faithfulness in tithing, and just being like, you know what? God's got this figured out. He's going to make it happen. Like, we're going to be fine, even in the moments where things are scary. And especially like this year, not to share too much, but there have been quite a few months in a row this year where Paul didn't have any income. And we were just like, and then, deals will happen, things will come. And, it's just, real estate has been different this year and the market's really shifting. So being able to hit our goals this year and see that we're going to hit our tithing goal for this year is just awesome. And we're very grateful, because there were a couple of times over the year where we're like, is it going to happen? Like, what are we going to do? Maybe our goals were too high, maybe not. And that happens sometimes. So I would say that like the tithing is kind of started us on the faithfulness journey. And then we tithed and were obedient at reading the Bible and stuff in the beginning. And then now those things have become habits. And now those are things that like, we didn't even have to write down that we both wanted to read the Bible every day this year, because it's just so ingrained in our daily lives now, and our prayer, and even the way we talk to each other and the things that we say to each other, like it's just shifted so much. So I'd say that like, if you don't have a daily Bible practice and you're not tithing, start there. Start with those two things and then see how God works in your life and how things shift. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, and I would say those are, I hate to say it, but like, reading the Bible every day was very difficult for me. But so was working out on a consistent basis. That was also very difficult for me. And so, yeah, that book, The Million Dollar Habits. I mean, that's the trying to learn a new habit a month. That was my life hack. So it's just, instead of trying to make all these changes at once, just make one change per month and just stick with that one change. And then once it becomes a habit, like now I can't really, I know I could, but I can't start my day without reading the Bible because it's just what I've done. And not for hours, just for a couple of minutes, right? But it's just a habit now.
Well, and it starts with just being obedient and doing it. Like, I'm just going to do it because I'm supposed to, even if I'm not understanding what it means, even if I'm not excited about it, I'm just going to get up and do it. And then over time, it's like, oh, I feel better. My day's better when I do this.
Yeah, you start to crave it. And it's the same thing.
And just like our life is better when we tithe and when we're excited about how much we get to give. And let me tell you, my husband, he holds money tight. So for him to get to this place where when we sit down and do our goals, and he came up with the tithing challenge, like, hey, how much do we want to give to the church this year? How much do we want to give? And I was so excited when he came up with that idea a few years back. And it's just been so fun and don't get me wrong, we argued about how much I tend to have bigger goals and dreams than him. And he's like, that's not realistic. But
the thing is
we've done it.
But as long as it's a set percentage.
Yeah. The set percentage.
Then I can deal with the higher amount because that means that we had a better year and we made more money too. Right. So, yeah.
So it's a fun way to look at it. Okay. So do you want to go over next?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing we did a little bit different this year on the planning session is we did it earlier in the year.
Oh, yeah. So last year at our planning session, because the past few years we ended up doing it like New Year's weekend. And that was kind of rough because you're coming off of the holidays and the month of December, you're trying to get all your numbers and all your things together and you're distracted and busy. And so last year at the end of our planning session, we were like, we're not doing this on New Year's again. We're not waiting until after Christmas. Let's do it early. So this year we planned it way far in advance. And I'm going to be honest, my dad decided to come down this weekend and I was just like, Dad, I love you, but I can't stay in town and hang out with you. Like I can't. And we got to see him for dinner and stuff. And I'm like, we've had this planned all year. We're doing this. It has to be done. And I was very proud of myself for setting that boundary, but that's how important this weekend is to us. And so we had it blocked off in the calendar. Like we were coming to do this weekend. And let me tell you, we're hitting the ground running on December 1st. Well, kind of already, but December 1st. And it's nice to know what our plan is and to be excited about the new year a month in advance. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. And like, we always have I have a paper, a book planner that I buy every year that I carry around with me. And something I didn't even realize, but at most planners, they start in like November of the year before. So there's no reason to not start early. And I would say this year too, because I knew the meeting was coming earlier. I mean, I've been thinking about my goals for 2 or 3 months now about the changes that I want to make.
We've been talking about it for months and excited.
Yeah. And so, like writing out the goals and doing the goal planning part didn't take nearly as long this time because I kind of already knew what I wanted to do. Yeah. And you still want to put it down on paper and you still want to, tell your partner and put it out there that this is what I want to do personally this year so she can hold me accountable. But, and
I think also when we come together and start talking about it, some of our personal goals kind of like intertwine now, or like, it's like, wait, okay, I want to go on this trip. But once we start doing the financial part, it's like, well, that trip's not we're not budgeting for it. So we have to kind of like push and pull a little bit, and really discuss. But also the other thing that I really loved about doing it early this year is talking about Christmas presents and what we're buying for the kids. Cause I am done shopping for every single person but our children. I get my Christmas shopping done early. And, this year we want to do something a little different. We want to go on a trip. And I'm like, I got to know, where are we going so I can plan, so I can purchase things that we need for the trip. And it was one of those things where like getting Paul to just sit down and commit to something, because he doesn't like to commit to things like that. Right. Mm-hmm. He hates committing to trips, or he loves to travel, but hates committing to planning things like that. And he will just kick it down the road as far as he possibly can. And so I gave a little bit on my plans for Christmas because we're going on a trip in July of next year. And we already have those things decided on what's happening and what we're doing. And so I wanted to do a little bit bigger thing for Christmas. And he's like, well, no, we're going to do the bigger thing in July. And so we compromised on that. And now it's just set and everything's good. And we don't have to have that anxiety or stress or irritation with each other.
Argument when we're getting in the car to leave to go on the trip because we're not happy about where we're going and how much we're spending.
So it's good that we came together and talked about all those things. And like I said, some of those things shifted once we come together. And then we also have goals for the kids and what we want to do with them and what activities they're going to be in next year and things like that. And so it's good. And I'll also add Brooks, as he's gotten a little bit older the past few years, at the beginning of the year, he gets a piece of paper now that he can write and everything, and he writes his goals on a piece of paper. And he did this all on his own a few years ago and taped it to the back of his door. Super proud moment as a parent. And your kids are going to do what you do. So if you want your kids to have a better life and you want them to be successful when they're grown, if you implement the habits, they're going to follow in your footsteps. They're going to become at least a good amount of who you are, whether you're trying or not. And I think also for us, seeing our kids be excited about the positive changes that we've made has been huge for us too. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good positive reinforcement. Yeah. So, and it's shocking too, because like I kind of started working out this year, and I just did it for me because I was in terrible shape and bad blood work and the whole thing. Right. And so I started working out, but then, sure enough, then Brooke starts following me down to the local park to do pull-ups with me. I didn't ask him to, he just wanted to do it. And then now that I'm lifting weights in front of the TV, following the workout on the TV, and now all of a sudden Brooks and Wyatt are both down there with their little dumbbells doing what I'm doing. It's like, they don't do it all the time, but more often than not they do.
Well, we've even caught Brooks doing a workout by himself a couple of times where they literally turn on the music on Pandora. Mm-hmm. Of course it's 90s alternative because that's what Daddy listens to. And, he's doing push-ups and sit-ups and everything. And he's like, I'm doing every minute, and he'll set the iPad for every minute.
No, he was just mimicking my exact workout I had done the day before that he had done with me. He was just doing it again, you know.
Well, I think you were working late that night. He's like, I gotta get my workout in. I was like, okay.
One of my goals is to play in a golf qualifier this coming year. And Brooks doesn't like golf, but all of a sudden he's dragging his golf clubs down to the golf course with me I can't go down there without him wanting to go with me. And it's just eye-opening to see that you forget your kids really are watching you. And it does inspire you. You have to do better. You have to be better, right? Because they'll follow whatever you do. So, and I was going to say something else about, doing the planning session earlier this year. Mm-hmm. You know what's going to happen?
What?
Is we're going to beat the January curse this year.
We're beating it. Is that the goal?
Because we're starting early, and so the curse is going to be out of the way, and we will, maybe something will happen in December this year, and we'll actually be able to get rolling January 1st.
I didn't even think about that. I never looked at it as a January curse.
Yep.
Listen, we're committing to that not happening this year. There will be no more January curse.
No, there's always going to be a hiccup.
Get behind us, Satan. It's not going to happen.
There's always going to be a hiccup. So just be ready and roll with it.
Well, and like I said, like even with 2020, like we shifted, and then we were like, I think one of the biggest things at the end of 2019 when we were planning for 2020, because we were closing the salon, there were I was moving where I was working. There was a lot of changes, and we were like, okay, we're not going to move this year. Do you remember? We were like, yeah, we're not moving this year. We're not buying rental properties. Like we have enough changes coming. And then 2020 hit. Mm-hmm. And I was stuck at home for 6 weeks. And I was like, I want to go look at houses. And then I found the house, and then we moved to Conroe, and like literally our whole life got changed. And that wasn't our plan initially, but we were like looking at how God like worked in all of the chaos and everything. God can shift anything and make it better.
And I was going to say, sometimes you do set these goals, and I think it is okay sometimes to shift and pivot, right? But I think a lot of times I've made, crazy goals in the past that were just completely unrealistic. And there's nothing wrong with that. You want to push yourself, right? But I think sometimes you realize that, Like I think one time one of my goals was to play in the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas or something. And
I don't
I know I didn't tell you this.
Okay.
This was long time ago.
Did it together.
No, it was a long time ago. So, but obviously that's not important to me anymore. So that's not one of my goals. I've pivoted to something else.
Yeah.
And like golf being one of my goals this year, it's more just to make sure that I'm doing something fun and getting out of the house and getting away from work sometimes, right? So
Can I also add, Paul's talking about golf being a hobby now. Go back 10 years ago and I was like, why can't this just be a hobby? And he's like, it could never just be a hobby, Savannah. It could never just be a hobby. And even go back like 3 years ago. I mean, he literally had like a multiple year sabbatical where he maybe only played once a year. Somebody asked him to play and he's just like, it's just not fun. I just don't want to do it and everything. And now it's like, I think it's cool how like it's shifted and your priorities have shifted. And now it's something that you can have back that doesn't like overtake our life. You know,
yet
that's maturity. It's not overtaking our life.
I'm just kidding.
Over my dead
I'm
body.
just kidding.
Anyways, I'm proud of you for looking at it in a different way and getting excited about it. I think it's good. I think it's really good for you.
But that's the thing though. I'm not really that excited about it.
Oh, okay.
But I'm making a conscious decision that I need to do something to get out of the house, to take my mind off of work, get some exercise, and like I have a competitive streak that as a man, I love to compete. So it wouldn't matter what it could be. I mean, it could be a triathlon, even though I hate swimming and riding a bike. So, so golf is my competitive outlet.
Well, I'm glad that you have that.
Is, so
now, do you have anything else that you want to go over on the goals and how we do this? I feel like we kind of covered it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last thing that I would say is just if you're needing inspiration, I like to listen to Zig Ziglar a lot. If you've never listened to him, you can find he's passed away, but you can find all of his stuff on YouTube now. But he was a huge goal planner and vision board and the whole thing. But he tells a story. He tells a story about the most famous competitive archer in the world, Olympic champion. Can't remember the guy's name, but he won, I don't know, several hundred competitions in a row. Like the best archer that ever lived. He's like, you put a blindfold on that guy and spin him around in circles and tell him to hit the target. Do you think he's going to hit the target? And the answer is obviously no. And he's like, well, what chance do you have? You're not an archer, but what chance do you have in your life of hitting your goals if you don't even know what they are?
Yeah.
And so that always kind of stuck with me. It's like, yeah, if I have no idea where I'm going, and there were many years where I had no idea where I wanted to go. And so no wonder I was floundering. So at least you've got to give yourself an idea. Where do I want to be at the end of the year? Where do I want to be in 5 years? And you've got to direct yourself. Or what chance do you have of ending up in any kind of place where you actually want to be?
Well, and let me also add, I think a lot of, especially as Christians, a lot of people are like, oh, well, God's in control. God's got a plan. God still expects you to do your part. Yeah, he might have huge things that he wants to happen in your life. But if you're just like sitting around and waiting and not putting in the work, it's not going to happen. You can't, let's say God's goal, Brooks talks about being Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like he's like all into like muscles and building. And he's like, I want to be is it Mr. Universe?
Yeah, there's Mr. Universe, Mr. Olympia, something like that.
Okay, he wants to do that. And it's like, okay, let's say God's purpose for his life was for him to do that. Well, he can't just sit on his butt on the couch for the rest of his life and it happen, So I think that, yes, you have to be open to God's will and what his destiny for you is, but you also have to be willing to do the work and spend the time figuring it out and trying things and failing. I failed a lot in my life on things that were my goals that I wanted to do. But at the same time, like the things that I've gotten on the other side of it, or the things that have happened because of the work that I put in for those other things, have been far greater. So put in the work to get to where you want to be and be open to God directing you in a different place, and just be willing to at least make a plan and be willing to fail. I think that's the other thing, because the times that we failed were the times where we learned and we grew big for that next year. Would you agree?
Yeah, in reality, there is no failing, right? There's just learning experiences. And so the people that fail the most, the people that have the most learning experiences are usually the ones that end up doing really, really well at the end when they look back.
Yeah. Would you like to say anything to the husbands, knowing that we got a lot of pushback from some circles and husbands that we talked to, where the husbands were just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And the women are like, let's do it.
Yeah. I guess the thing to me was, I guess I didn't realize that I'm one I'm one of the few guys that is like all about the budgeting and looking at the finances daily.
We're like flip-flopped, I guess.
Yeah. So, I guess the most important thing I would say is like, you don't have to be the one that's all about the budgeting and the money. Somebody needs to be, right? Or you're not going to know where all the money went. But I think the biggest shift in our life, one of the biggest shifts in our lives, in our marriage, and things going better and being able to do more of the things that we want to do, and maybe having more of the things that we wanted to have, was when we had to argue about our common goals and what they were going to be. And it's surprising. Like, you sit down and like, oh, let's do goal planning. And then like, well, what do you want to do this year? Well, I want to do this. Well, I want to do the complete opposite. It's shocking how many times your goals as a couple don't align with each other. And, but then, guys don't like to talk, but you're forced to have a conversation about why each person feels that way. And then you start to kind of understand where they're coming from. And I think at that point you realize that maybe you do want more of the same things. But once you have those common goals, and again, you can have your private individual goals too, but once you have some common goals about where you want to go and you want your family to go, then all of a sudden it's like, again, you're not pulling each other sideways and just fighting for control. You're actually working together and moving forward. And that's the only way to get to where you want to go in the end.
And I would say to the wives, and this is like, once again, we're kind of flip-flop, because I'm not the one that does all the financial budgeting and I don't pay all the bills. Paul does all of that. But to the wives, I would say, like, I'm a very strong-willed woman. Like, I'm independent. I'm going to do what I want to do. I've always had this attitude. And I used to tell Paul, you knew who I was when you married me. Like, you knew I had like control issues and I was going to fight you for power when we got married. But the more that we've done our planning session, and the more that I've submitted to more and had to compromise more to like what he wanted to do, the closer we've gotten and the more respect I have for him. Like, now when he talks about saving or retirement, because I used to have the idea about retirement, like, we don't even know if we're going to be here. We might be dead. So you can't take it with us when we die. You can't take it with you to the grave. And now my attitude is like, no, like, what can we leave for our children? Even if we're not here, like, what can we do to help them in the future and our grandchildren, and like build something that lasts far beyond when we're dead, and teaching them and letting them see so that they have good, healthy habits with money, because neither of us had the healthiest habits with money when we got married. And we've really shifted, but we had to do that together. And it required some arguing, and it required some fighting, and it required some compromises that were not fun. But the other thing is too, like, when we first started, that first goal that we hit together of like paying off, I don't remember, it was a credit card debt of like, it was an obscene amount of money. We did it so much faster than we thought we were going to do it, and so much faster than we planned, because we were doing it together. So there would be moments where it'd be like, hey, I want to go out to dinner tonight. And it was like, okay. And then it was like, wait, we have this money. Maybe we should just put it towards that card and we'll just eat at home. And like, it was something that we were working at together, and that really helped us grow so much closer. And so I would say, like, women, you want intimacy and you want your husband to talk to you about things. Men will talk about money, and they will talk about things, financial goals, or at least my man will, I don't know. But husbands also, like, you can't just let your wife do it all. You want to be the leader of the family, you have to lead in every area. And women are stressed out having this burden on them. I have not spoken to a woman that is in control of the money, that likes being in control of everything, and likes that her husband doesn't pay attention. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'm stirring the pot right now, but it needs to be said. And then I would like to also add, in having so many conversations with people about our planning session and realizing that, like, there is not a good planner out there for this, we created a basically step-by-step guide and planner for his and her goals and family goals. And it's like it has a yearly budget tracker. It has your calendar for the year. It has check-ins, quarterly check-ins for you to do together. And so that should be up and ready to purchase, you say, by the end of the week?
Yeah, it'll be up on Amazon.
And we're super excited about this.
So it's mostly Savannah. So I'm going to say Savannah will be a published author here before too much longer.
We will be published. Anyways, so we're super excited to share that with you guys, and we'd love your input. But we broke it down exactly how we do it. And each page, like there's parts for the man to sit down and do all of his stuff. There's parts for the woman to do all of hers. And then you come together and you do your family planning. And then it's got monthly and quarterly check-ins together so that you can implement these habits that can help you be more successful as a couple in the future.
Yeah. So I would say 10 years of trial and error and mistakes led to this this planner. So I think it's going to be pretty good, pretty helpful.
So too. So we'd love to hear your feedback if you start implementing this. If you start to sit down and do this and you have questions, shoot us an email, drop us a line on social media. We are happy to answer questions or cheer you on as you do this. We'd love to see how it goes for everyone. And also just remember, like, man's inflation can't affect God's purpose for you. Like, the things going on in the world, they don't always matter. Like, you can get around it in different ways, and God's going to take care of you if you let him take care of you.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the biggest thing for me, just closing thought, I guess, would be, you just got to get started. You know, that's usually the hardest part. And, I was always very down on New Year's resolutions because they never worked for me. But it's because I didn't make them work. I just wasn't even remotely disciplined. So like this past year, you know, I started working out in January and I honestly thought I'd be done by February. But that habit thing, like it, you know, now if I work out 3 days a week and if I miss a day, like I start to get, like, it's a habit. I have to do it. And it's just, my brain just goes there. It's automatic. So start small. You don't have to make these huge, massive goals if you don't want to, but just getting started and seeing some progress is the most important thing. So
yeah, just get started.
Do something, get started. Yep.
All right. Well, in the meantime, stay salty.
Thanks for listening to the Salty Life podcast. We appreciate you choosing to spend some time with us.
If you like what you've heard today, please like and share on your favorite social media.
And don't forget to click the subscribe button to hear new episodes of the Salty Life podcast.
Until next time, stay salty.